Hi, my name's Maria. My sister called me brain dead in front of our entire office. People laughed. No one defended me. What they didn't know? I wasn't just the quiet girl in data. I was married to the man who just bought the company. But that's not even the part that hurt the most. It's what she did years ago. The scholarship I never got. The email I was never supposed to read. The silence my mother still chooses. How do you confront a family that erases you while smiling to your face? And when the truth finally comes out, is it too late to get back what they stole? Let me tell you what really happened. Mondays always started with silence. Not the peaceful kind you enjoy with a warm cup of coffee, but the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy coat you never asked to wear. At 7:42 a.m., I stepped into the elevator of Aurora Creative Inc. on the 17th floor, gripping the strap of my laptop bag and keeping my eyes on the brushed steel wall. I could smell peppermint gum and someone's cologne, overpowering and expensive. Everyone stood just close enough to suggest friendliness, but not enough to make eye contact. That was office intimacy, performative and practiced. Celesta stood in the front, her hair pulled into a bun so precise it looked cruel. She didn't glance back. She never did. Not in the elevator, not in meetings, and certainly not when people asked if I was the new assistant from analytics. I wasn't new. I'd been here 3 years. I built the system they used to track user retention. But I never corrected them. Correcting people in rooms where your sister holds the power feels like playing chess with only pawns. I slipped out the elevator just after her, staying a few paces behind. The office was already humming, screens lighting up, phones buzzing, people greeting each other like they hadn't just seen each other on Slack 10 minutes ago. My desk sat at the far end by the window. Not the view side, just far enough that I could pretend to be part of the view. I unpacked my lunch, chickpea salad in a reusable container, with lemon vinaigrette and a single sprig of mint. No one cared, but it mattered to me. I always believed the little things were where dignity lived when respect was missing. I powered on my laptop. The screen blinked twice before settling into the familiar dashboard. The first email was from Celesta. Subject: Quick favor, message. Can you bring coffee to the strategy room? Use my card at the cafe. Medium roast, oat milk, no sugar, the X. No, please. No, I know you're not my intern. Just the way she always asked. Casually enough to pretend it wasn't a command. I replied, sure. That was all. Not because I didn't have words, but because I'd learned long ago that giving people more than they offer you tends to make them uncomfortable. The walk to the cafe wasn't long, but long enough for 2 junior associates to pass by and not realize I was in earshot. She's like, Celesta's little shadow, one of them whispered, chuckling. Didn't she used to be something in analytics? She's something all right. Celesta's coffee runner. I didn't flinch. I didn't correct them. I just stood in line, bought the coffee, and walked back. By the time I placed the cup on the conference table, Celesta didn't even look up. She nodded, barely, and went back to her slide deck. Her nails were painted a shade of red that made even apologies look calculated. Later that afternoon, I opened the quarterly performance report. I had spent 2 full weeks running regressions, cleaning datasets, building predictive models for user segmentation that ended up shaving nearly $600K off the budget. I scrolled through the document slowly. Strategy team credited, design team credited. Celesta's name appeared 3 times. Mine? Nowhere. Just 1 line in the appendix. Technical support, internal analytics division. I leaned back. My throat tightened, but not in a way I could name. I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel angry. I felt unlisted, like an uninvited guest to my own contribution. An email pinged. Subject: Fantastic job, Celesta. You're a powerhouse. From HR, I was CC'd. No message. Just a thread of applause that never reached my name. I stood up, walked to the restroom, and closed myself in the last stall. Not to cry, just to breathe. The The kind of breath you take when the air around you doesn't recognize you as belonging to it. Back at my desk, I opened a blank document, typed a single line. Am I invisible, or are they pretending not to see me? I deleted it before saving. Words wouldn't save me in a company built on performance and proximity. Lunch came. I sat at the usual table. Alone. Everyone else huddled around takeout bags and overpriced smoothies. Celesta walked past, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on a sentence that never included me. She paused, glanced at my lunch. Still the same, she murmured, not unkindly. Not kindly either. I didn't respond. She walked away, and I felt something stir. Not shame, not sadness. Something sharper. By Tuesday morning, the air in the office felt different. Heavier. Like everyone knew something was coming, but no one wanted to say it aloud. Celesta hadn't spoken to me since the day before. She didn't need to. Her silence had always done more damage than her words. At 8:43 a.m., I was finishing a data visualization draft when her message popped up on Slack. Hey, could you speak for 5 mins at the 9 a.m. huddle about the new customer behavior patterns? No deck needed. Just a quick share. No deck, no prep, no prior context. It was already 8:43. And she wanted me to speak, a word she only used when setting people up to fall. Still, I said, sure. I didn't say thank you. That's the thing about me. I used to fill the quiet with gratitude just to keep the temperature down. I wasn't doing that anymore. 9 o'clock came fast. I walked into the main conference room to find nearly every manager and director seated. Even HR was there. The CEO's assistant was tapping her pen like a metronome against her notepad. Celesta stood near the front with her arms folded, the kind of stance that made people think she was in charge even when she wasn't speaking. I noticed she didn't bring her laptop. She wasn't here to lead, she was here to watch. She waved me up with a small gesture, like I was a server refilling her wine glass. Mireya will walk us through some behavioral insights we're tracking, she said. I cleared my throat and stepped forward. There was no screen behind me, just blank glass and the distorted reflection of a woman I barely recognized. I've been tracking a trend in user drop-off during onboarding, I began, hands tightening around the clicker that wasn't connected to anything. It seems to correlate with the timing of email nudges and— Celesta cut me off mid-sentence. Sweetheart, she said, loud enough to freeze the room. This isn't a TED Talk. Are you brain dead? The words didn't land softly. They sliced the air like scissors through paper. There was a pause. Then it came, the snickering. First one, then two. And then it broke out like a nervous fire. Some laughed because they thought they were supposed to. Others because they'd been waiting to see if I'd finally crack. A guy 2 rows back lifted his phone. Not to email, not to check his calendar. He was recording. I stood there blinking. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was trying not to say too much. I could feel the heat rising from my collarbone up to my cheeks. My ears buzzed. My lips parted. I'll follow up with the report later, I said, voice tight. I didn't wait for permission. I walked back to my seat and sank into it, staring straight ahead like I was still presenting. Celesta continued like nothing happened. That was her gift, humiliation disguised as humor. The meeting droned on. I heard none of it. Once it ended, people gathered near the coffee station, chatting like they'd just watched a sitcom rerun. No one looked at me. No one checked if I was okay. I wasn't surprised. I'd learned long ago that silence isn't absence. It's a choice. I made my way to the bathroom. The second stall was empty. I locked the door, sat down, clothes still on, and leaned forward with my arms on my thighs. I wasn't crying. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. I opened my phone. No messages, no emails, no Slack pings asking if I was all right. I started a new email in my drafts folder. Subject, resignation, Mireya Veilbody. Effective immediately. I hovered over the send button, then hit backspace. Slowly, deliberately, line by line until the screen was blank again. That email wasn't for them. It was for me, to prove I still had a way out, that I could choose to leave instead of being pushed. Back at my desk, no one said a word. Celesta walked past around noon, tapping her nails against her phone. She didn't pause. I opened Slack. The thread from the meeting was already pinned. No mention of what happened. No correction. No context. I stared at the message, then minimized it. By 3:10 p.m., I told the office manager I wasn't feeling well and scheduled a ride home. Outside, the weather had shifted. Overcast skies, slick sidewalks, trees shedding their color. Autumn in Minneapolis had a way of making everything look cinematic, even when you felt like the extra. The rideshare driver didn't speak, just the occasional GPS cue and the sound of tires gliding over wet pavement. I looked out the window at the city I used to love. I wondered if people passing by could tell I'd been embarrassed in a room full of people who wore smiles like shields. I whispered to myself, maybe I am brain dead, or maybe they've just made me feel that way. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, "This is where the story changes." I didn't know how yet, but I knew it had to. By the time I got home, the sky had turned the color of burnt peach, just enough light to see the silhouettes of the trees lining the street. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check the news. I just kicked off my shoes, walked into the kitchen, and put the kettle on. There was something about the whistling of a kettle in an empty house that made everything feel more honest. You can't pretend to be okay when the only thing breaking the silence is steam. As I waited, I noticed the light above the sink flickering again. That old bulb had been temperamental for months, but tonight it flashed just once, quick and sharp, then held steady. Like it was trying to tell me it remembered too. I leaned on the counter and looked out the window, where leaves swirled like they couldn't decide where to land. And just like that, I was 17 again. Sitting at this same kitchen table, a scholarship letter unopened in front of me. My hands trembling, not from fear, but from hope that for once, just once, someone outside of this house had seen what I could really do. Celesta had walked in that day wearing her debate blazer, still riding the high of another school award. She hadn't even looked at the envelope. She just said, "Did you check the mailbox for mine?" I remember laughing, nervously. "This one's addressed to me." She'd said nothing after that, just hummed a little tune and walked past. I waited 3 days, then a week. But no follow-up email came, no phone call, no congratulations. I didn't know until 2 years later, during a reunion dinner with my old friend Silas, what really happened. He stirred his drink, didn't meet my eyes. I wasn't supposed to say anything, but I held my breath. Not because I feared what came next, but because I already knew. Celesta reached out to the foundation. She told them you struggled under pressure, that you had episodes. Episodes? I repeated, more stunned by the creativity of the lie than the lie itself. She said she was trying to protect you, said the stress would break you. I didn't speak after that. I just nodded and chewed my food until it felt like paper in my mouth. Back in the kitchen now, 15 years later, I poured the hot water over a bag of chamomile and sat in the same chair I had all those years ago. The grain in the wood hadn't changed. The lines in me had. My phone buzzed. Voicemail, Mom. I put the mug down and pressed play. "Mireya, sweetheart," she began in that soft voice she always used when she needed me to be docile. "I heard about the meeting. Your sister's under a lot of pressure. I'm not saying she handled it right, but maybe this isn't the time to stir things. She's up for promotion. You know how hard she's worked." My mouth twisted, but I didn't interrupt. I never did. "You've always been the calmer one," she continued. "The strong one. Please don't make this harder for her than it already is." I deleted the message without finishing it. That wasn't rebellion. It was release. The kind that doesn't come with fanfare or fire. Just a soft closing of a door you won't open again. I walked into my bedroom, pulled out the moleskin journal I hadn't touched in years. It was tucked behind the books I kept but didn't reread. titles I clung to for identity, not relevance. I opened to a blank page and wrote one line. When they disappear long enough, you start inventing reasons to make it hurt less. I stared at it. No edits. No second guesses. Then I folded the page back, pressed it flat, and slipped it under my phone. I wasn't sure what I needed it for, but I knew I wasn't done needing it yet. The journal was still on the nightstand the next morning, page folded neat under my phone like a warning I had written to myself. I left it there. By Wednesday afternoon, the office had taken on a strange sort of hush. Not silence exactly, but the kind of quiet that happens when people are pretending they didn't witness something awful. They spoke just loud enough to not be accused of whispering, but never directly to me. I walked into the kitchen, same time I always did, hoping my presence wouldn't register as an event. No one said anything, but I could feel the shift, the way people paused just a breath longer when I entered the room. I grabbed my container from the fridge, sat down at the corner table near the wall, and opened the lid like it mattered. There used to be another chair beside mine. Amy's. That seat was empty now, and this time, it wasn't just vacant. It was deliberately left alone, like no one wanted to be caught taking the place of someone who'd made the mistake of being decent. I took a bite of my salad, but the flavor sat flat on my tongue. I wasn't hungry. I was trying to hold on to routine, like routine could somehow rebuild dignity. That's when my phone buzzed with a Slack message. Amy. I shouldn't have said anything, it read. I just thought, you deserved better. Beneath it, a screenshot. Her dismissal notice, formal tone, signature from HR, the kind of language that softens a knife. Intern termination due to disruption of team hierarchy. No names were mentioned, but I knew who'd written it. Celesta didn't need to put her name on things. Her fingerprints were enough. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew if I said anything now, it might make things worse for her. She'd already done what no one else in that office dared. She said something. I closed the message and opened the shared folder where all internal memos were stored. Scrolling through, I found the official announcement. Amy Tollin's internship has ended. We thank her for her contributions. Contributions. That word stuck in my throat like a splinter. What contribution was that? Compassion? The room behind me buzzed with the soft noise of coffee brewing and casual cruelty. Someone laughed too loudly, like they needed to remind the room they weren't aligned with me. I closed my laptop. I needed air, but not outside. Just distance. Walking past the copy room, I overheard two coworkers at the printer. Why did she even get involved? One said. The words dropped like gum under a desk. It's not like she knew her long enough to get personal, the other answered. My steps didn't slow. I didn't spin around and demand decency. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. What mattered now was what I chose to do with it. Back at my desk, I opened the draft of the resignation email I'd been quietly tweaking since Monday. I read it once slowly. Then I hit delete. The decision wasn't dramatic. I didn't whisper, I'm staying. I just pressed backspace until it was gone. Later that afternoon, I stood in the elevator alone. The glass walls showed my reflection over the city, grayer now, shadowed by clouds that hadn't yet rained. For the first time in days, I looked at myself. Not my clothes, not my posture, not whether my cardigan made me look small, but at my face. I didn't see someone defeated. I saw someone still standing. The elevator reached the ground floor. I didn't step out. Instead, I pressed the button for the 14th floor, the executive wing. If speaking up gets someone fired, maybe it's time someone stops whispering. The elevator opened on the 14th floor, and I stepped out before I could talk myself out of it. No one stopped me. No one asked why I was up there. That's how silence works in places like this. It covers you just enough to look like permission. I moved past the row of glass offices, my heels quieter than my thoughts. Celesta's door was cracked open. She was on a call, her voice smooth and professional. Absolutely, we'll take the lead on that segment. Yes, I'll send it directly. She didn't see me until I was already inside. She finished her sentence and hung up without looking up. Do you need something? I shut the door behind me. There's a slide in the presentation you're sending to senior leadership, I said, keeping my voice even. Page 3, the predictive model. Celesta leaned back in her chair, finally meeting my eyes. Yes? It's mine. She tilted her head, that familiar false confusion crossing her face. Your name's not on it. Exactly. She offered a tight smile. Are we really doing this? You want to bicker over formatting credits? I took a slow breath. You took my work again. And this isn't about credit. It's about theft. It stops now. Her expression didn't change. Her voice dropped just slightly, lower than polite. You want a war now? With me? You'll lose, Mireya. You've always been softer than you think. I stepped forward, not out of anger, but out of certainty. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to let you know. If you keep signing your name on things that aren't yours, someone will make sure the right names get seen. Celesta crossed her arms. You sound like you've been reading self-help books. No, I said. I've just been quiet long enough to recognize when someone mistakes silence for safety. I left her office before she could answer, the conversation unfinished, but not incomplete. That was the difference now. I didn't need her response. I needed my own boundary. Back at my desk, I opened the presentation. I scrolled to page 3 and stared at the model, mine, unchanged from the Excel sheet I built on a Sunday morning in my pajamas. I copied the file and dragged it into a folder labeled Originals. I didn't create it to prove a point. But now it would. That night, Joran was already home when I walked in, sitting on the couch with his laptop open. The living room was dim, warm with the amber glow of the floor lamp. He didn't ask how my day was. He closed the laptop and just looked at me. I sat down next to him, our shoulders barely touching. After a few minutes, I said, Do you remember the library? He smiled gently. Which one? We practically lived there. The time I helped you prep for your stats exam, the night before your final. He let out a breath of a laugh. You brought a highlighter in 3 colors, made me flashcards, and didn't say a word when I got every single question wrong the first round. I leaned my head back. You told me something that night. You said, You make the world measurable, Mireya, but you never take space in it. His smile faded into something quieter. I didn't mean it as a criticism. I know, I said, but it stuck. He reached over and took my hand, his grip warm, familiar. When you're ready to stop being invisible, just tell me where to stand. There was no sentimentality in his voice, no pity, just a fact, simple as the ticking of the clock above the bookshelf. I nodded, and we didn't say anything else for a long time. Later that night, long after he had gone to bed, I opened my inbox and stared at the anonymous complaint draft I'd been writing since Monday. It detailed what happened in the meeting room, the brain-dead remark, the stolen credit, the intern who was terminated for showing basic decency, all of it. I hovered over send, and then I closed the draft, not because I was letting it go, but because I didn't want to send it anonymously anymore. If I was going to speak, it wouldn't be in whispers. Sometimes, choosing not to whisper is the loudest thing you can do. Friday morning came with a polished edge, sky cloudless, air still, like the city was holding its breath. At 8:57, I sat quietly in the back row of the main conference room, legs crossed, notebook on my lap, pen untouched. Celesta stood at the front, hands perfectly poised on either side of the podium. She was in her element, charismatic, commanding, carefully rehearsed. Her voice echoed off the glass and metal like it belonged to someone who had never been questioned. Today's alignment session, she began, is about culture and accountability, the kind of culture that supports innovation, resilience, and yes, excellence. The word hung in the air, rehearsed and hollow. She clicked to the first slide. Bold text, vague goals, team empowerment, vision-driven collaboration. A collection of safe phrases that meant nothing and said less. The second slide appeared, then the third. I knew that third slide. I'd built it. Every data point, every visual, every label, mine. And under it? Her name. She didn't credit anyone else. Not me, not the team, just her. I waited. Slide 5. Something shifted. The screen froze for a second, flickered, then jumped to a different image entirely. A paused video frame. Grainy, slightly tilted. Celesta's face, mid-sentence. Her mouth forming words I knew too well. The room fell still. Not quiet, still. Like it couldn't breathe. Then the video played. "This isn't a TED Talk. Are you brain dead?" The audio was clear. My voice followed, barely audible. "I'll follow up with the report." Laughter. The kind that stings because it's real. In the room now, chairs creaked. Someone coughed. No one moved. Celesta looked at the screen, then down at the remote. She clicked. Nothing changed. Clicked again. Still frozen on her face, her voice repeating like an accusation. One more click. Harder. Still nothing. She turned toward the IT manager in the corner. "Kill the feed." He hesitated. "It's embedded, not a live stream." At the back of the room, I stood. All eyes turned. "The clip is real," I said, voice steady. "The context is worse." I walked forward slowly, the only movement in a room full of frozen bodies. "This wasn't a one-time comment," I said. "It wasn't a joke taken out of context. This has been the standard here, for people who don't look the part, who don't speak loud enough, who aren't in the right circle." I stopped in front of the projector. I didn't need the screen anymore. It's a culture, and it ends today. No shouting, no shaking, just a line in the sand, and my name signed under it. After the meeting, I returned to my desk. The air in the office wasn't heavy now. It was sharp. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd made it impossible for everyone else not to. At 1:36 p.m., an email from HR hit the entire company. Subject: Internal investigation initiated. Workplace culture review. I opened it. Read it twice. Then closed it and opened my drafts folder. The same complaint I had once considered sending anonymously? No longer needed. Instead, I clicked Compose, attached the clip, typed my full name, and hit send. Not to HR. To the board. By 2:05, I could feel the ripple. People moving differently. Conversations cut short when I walked by. A few stares I didn't meet. At 2:47, a colleague leaned toward my desk, the one who never said a word before. "You just declared war," he said. I looked up from my keyboard. "No, I just stopped playing dead." Later that afternoon, I passed Celesta in the hallway outside HR. Her posture wasn't crisp anymore. Her eyes darted. Her voice had a sharpness that no longer landed. "I need to speak to the board," she said to the HR director. "There's a process," they replied, carefully neutral. Celesta's jaw twitched. "This is absurd. She's manipulating everything. This is personal." I didn't stop walking. I passed her like she was someone I used to know. She didn't see me anymore, not as someone to ignore, but as someone she couldn't erase. I kept walking after passing Celesta in the hallway, my eyes locked on the elevator doors at the far end. She didn't follow, and I didn't look back. Some goodbyes don't need words. They happen in the space between one glance and the absence of another. An hour later, I sat in the smaller of two conference rooms, prepping for a leadership review with senior analytics. It wasn't supposed to be formal, just an overview of upcoming model changes and projected ad spending. But when I opened the shared presentation on the company server, my hands stilled on the trackpad. The formatting was off. The font was different. The structure, gutted. Celesta had gone into the file sometime overnight. She'd stripped the core slides, the core logic, and inserted out-of-date projections with flawed visualizations. Not outright sabotage. No, just enough to make it look like I didn't know my own work. A few minutes later, I walked into the senior leadership meeting, knowing exactly what she'd done, and I chose to present it anyway. The projector glitched 3 times in the first 5 minutes. The graphs didn't match the talking points. The numbers contradicted the previous campaign's performance. I kept going. Celesta sat near the head of the table, arms crossed, tapping her nail on the side of her tumbler. She didn't have to smirk. Her silence did the heavy lifting. When I finished, I didn't apologize. I didn't make excuses. I closed my laptop, thanked everyone for their time, and returned to my desk. By the time I sat down, a new message had popped up in my inbox. From Joren. Subject: Eyes are opening body. Check the thread below, quietly. It was a forwarded email chain from the board of directors. No greetings, no exclamation points. Just a subject line. Leadership Ethics Inquiry. Pending acquisition impact. One director had written, "Should we discuss internal ethics breaches before finalizing the control shift?" Another replied, "Celesta Drine's most recent submission included data plagiarized from the analytics team, attached for review." Then, finally, "We're proceeding with the acquisition, but any unresolved personnel conflicts must be addressed immediately." I stared at the screen. Not with glee, not with revenge in my chest, just relief. They saw it. She hadn't fooled them. At 3:42 p.m., we were called back to the HR floor for a compliance review. No context given. The room was tense when I entered. Executives, HR leads, and someone from the legal team. Before anyone spoke, the door opened one last time. Joren stepped in. Not as my husband, but as the majority stakeholder. He didn't sit next to me. He sat across from Celesta. Her posture faltered. Her breath caught. She looked at him like she was trying to rewrite the past with a glance. But Joren didn't look at her. He looked at the HR lead. "I'm here to observe only," he said, "but I'd like to note for the record, internal ethics concerns have reached my desk. I trust they're being taken seriously." Celesta didn't speak. No one needed her to. After the meeting, I stood near the window in the executive hallway. The skyline stretched beyond the glass, the city blinking like it was winking at me for the first time. HR sent out a company-wide update 2 hours later. Pending further investigation into recent leadership conduct, several department heads will be placed on administrative leave effective immediately. Celesta's name was at the top. I watched her walk out of her office. She wasn't escorted. They didn't need to. The weight of exposure does its own escorting. As she passed by the rest of the team, she caught Deirdre's eye, her most loyal shadow. Deirdre stood. "You told us she was weak," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Turns out she just outlasted you." Celesta turned to me as she reached the elevator. "This was yours, wasn't it?" she asked. I didn't blink. "No," I said. "You built this. I just stopped covering for you." The elevator closed. The fall was hers. The silence was mine, until now. The boardroom lights had been dimmed to a soft glow. The only sound in the room, the quiet rustle of paper as contracts were stacked, initialed, and passed across the table. No more voices, no more defenses, just signatures and consequences. I sat near the far end, next to the assistant general counsel. My role wasn't formal. I wasn't there as an executive or a plaintiff. I was there as a witness. That felt important to me. I didn't come to demand anything. I came to see it finished. Joren stood, tall and understated, in a slate gray blazer and a quiet sort of resolve that didn't need to be loud to be respected. "I'll keep this brief," he said, turning toward the board. "I'm not interested in micromanaging the culture of a company I didn't build, but I won't fund a system that rewards silence and punishes character. Respect isn't a bonus. It's part of the cost." No one said a word. He signed the final document and passed it back to legal. Control of Aurora Creative was his now. Celesta, seated across the table, didn't look up. Her silence wasn't unfamiliar, but this time it wasn't calculated. It was surrender. HR followed with their own announcement. Effective immediately, Celesta would be placed on administrative leave pending completion of the internal investigation. She offered no objection. Her chair creaked as she pushed back from the table and left the room. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I stood, walked calmly to her office, and paused in the doorway. It was still pristine. No personal photos, no clutter, just the same artificial orchid in the corner, and the faint scent of her citrus lotion lingering in the air. I stepped in and laid the envelope on her desk. Handwritten, just a few lines. I stayed silent for years to protect your name. I won't protect what you became. That was it. I left the envelope there and placed a printed copy in HR's file cabinet, not for protection, but so the record would match the truth. On my way back to my desk, the HR manager caught up with me. The board would like to offer you a role in restructuring analytics leadership. I didn't flinch. I appreciate it, I said. But I didn't do this to move up. I did it so no one else has to move out of the way. She looked at me curiously. Is there anything you want? I paused. Yes. Start a task force, something real, with teeth. Ethics, reporting, training. Named after someone no one expected to be strong. The Mireya Initiative? No. I shook my head. The Carter Program. My grandmother taught ESL classes for free out of her garage. She didn't have a title. She just believed everyone deserved to be heard. She nodded, quietly taking a note. We can make that happen. Back at my desk, I pulled out the book I'd been keeping in the drawer. Leadership in Crisis, The Ethics of Action. I'd highlighted a line weeks ago, not knowing I'd come back to it now. Silence doesn't absolve you, it just delays your consequence. I tore the page out gently and left it folded on my keyboard. I packed slowly. No rush, no dramatics. I didn't even take the plant I'd kept on my windowsill, just a framed picture of my grandmother and a thumb drive. In the lobby, I passed by people who had never spoken to me, never learned my name. They didn't say anything now either, but 3 of them stood up. They didn't clap. They didn't smile. They just stood and watched me leave. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their memory of me to be kind. I just needed it to be accurate. I didn't need them to remember me. I needed them to remember what silence costs. 1 week later, I stood barefoot in my kitchen, the kettle hissing behind me. The hush in the house was different now. No longer heavy, just honest. It didn't press against me like it used to. It simply existed. The cardboard box with my name still sat by the entryway, half unpacked. I hadn't rushed. I hadn't needed to. Leaving didn't mean escaping. It meant I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission. I walked to the kitchen table and saw the small envelope that had arrived earlier that morning. No return address, no logo. Just my name, handwritten in simple print. I sat down, peeled it open, and unfolded a single sheet of paper. Mireya. I saw it all and said nothing. I'm sorry. Deirdre. That was it. There was no apology for believing Celesta. No justification. Just that. 4 lines that held more weight than any boardroom statement ever could. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't call her. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw it away either. I stood, walked into the hallway, and slid it into a drawer I'd labeled years ago. Keep, don't forget. That drawer held a handful of things. A copy of my first job offer. A photo of my grandmother teaching English in her garage. A news clipping about the campaign I built but never got credit for. I didn't keep them to dwell. I kept them because I'd learned that memory without context is how people get rewritten. Late that afternoon, sunlight poured in through the living room window, low and golden. I passed by the mantel and paused in front of an old photo. Me and Celesta, maybe 9 and 13, covered in dirt, laughing like girls who hadn't learned yet that even bloodlines carry hierarchy. I picked it up, held it, and after a moment, slid it just behind a half-burned candle. Not out of frame, but not front and center anymore either. That evening, I arrived at a small community center near the edge of Lake Harriet. The sign outside was simple. Back to work. Digital Skills for Women Over 40. Inside, 8 women sat around a scratched wooden table, their laptops open, notebooks ready. Most of them had never worked in tech. A few hadn't worked outside the home in decades. All of them looked slightly unsure they belonged. I smiled and started with the basics: data hygiene, browser extensions, Google Sheets. No one interrupted me. No one called me sweetheart. Halfway through the session, one woman raised her hand. "So, where did you used to work?" I paused for a beat, then smiled. "I was in analytics," I said, "at a place that taught me everything about systems and how they break." She nodded, scribbled something down, and didn't press further. When class ended, they lingered. Some asked questions. Others just thanked me quietly and gathered their things. I packed up slowly, glancing once at the whiteboard before turning off the lights. Outside, the sun had nearly disappeared behind the trees. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets and took the path along the lake, where the breeze stirred just enough to remind me it was almost November. About halfway through my loop, I saw him. Joren was seated at our usual bench, hands folded, gaze on the water. He looked up as I approached, but didn't speak. I sat beside him. The air between us was comfortable, unhurried. After a few quiet moments, he said, "Does it feel like enough?" I thought about it. The meetings, the letters, the video, the silence, the standing. "No," I said, "but it feels like mine." He nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. The sky had turned violet and copper, mirrored on the surface of the lake like it too had something it was learning to let go of. We didn't say much after that. Some bruises don't fade, but they stop dictating how you walk. And if you're still here, listening, reflecting, then maybe you've walked through a version of this story yourself. Maybe you've been underestimated, overlooked, or told in 100 quiet ways that you didn't belong at the table you helped build. What I've learned is this: you don't always get the apology. You won't always get the audience. But you can always choose how you carry your voice. And sometimes, reclaiming your space doesn't mean shouting. It just means not shrinking anymore. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my name back, my dignity back, my voice. And I got it. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I stopped whispering. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed silent just to keep the peace, and later realized it only protected the wrong person? Or maybe you were the one who watched in silence, unsure whether to speak. Either way, your story matters. Your turning point may not look like mine, but it's real, and it's yours to tell when you're ready. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been in Mireya's shoes, or Deirdre's? If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments, or just tell me where you're watching from. I truly want to hear from you. If you didn't connect with the story, tell me why. What would have made it hit closer to home? Feedback helps me grow, and I'm here to listen. And finally, if you believe in the power of quiet strength, in stories that honor dignity over drama, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your voice, your presence, it's what keeps these stories alive. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Until then, stay grounded, stay kind, and never mistake silence for surrender.